Hello, everybody. It's great to be here one more time today. My name is Gary Fowler. I'm the CEO, President, and Founder of GSD, Get You Done Venture Studios, a premier AI and quantum venture studio located in the heart of Silicon Valley. We are a family office. We are an AI-enabled PR group, and we also build frontier AI technologies because we believe the world needs it. And I'd like to welcome you each to GSD Presents Top Global Startups, where we're going to go deep with a founder, and an operator that's building a real company in this noisy tech world. Today's conversation is one of every AI founder, investor, and operator that needs to hear. As AI adoption explodes, so do cloud bills. And suddenly the old grow now, optimize later playbook is broken. We're joined by Mike Weider, co-founder and CEO of Frugal AI. Mike is a rare mix of serial entrepreneur, operator, and investor. He's built and exited multiple venture-backed startups, including Watchfire, Blaze, and Shoebox, with acquisitions by IBM, Akami, and EQT. Today, Mike helps companies answer one brutal question. How do you build profitable AI businesses when compute costs threaten to eat your margins alive? We'll dig into the new unit economics of AI, why many startups are quietly becoming uninvestable, and what founders can do right now to survive and win in this incredibly changing reality. So with that, I'd like to invite Mike to the show. Hi, Mike.
Hey, Gary. Glad to be here.
Yeah, it's good to see you. So, Mike, let's start with the big picture. What changed in the last 12 to 18 months has suddenly made cloud costs an existential issue for AI startups?
Yeah, great question. We've been operating in the last 20 years of cloud with a certain assumption that most tech companies could make, which is that the incremental cost of adding an additional customer was basically zero. In that you spend all this money on your infrastructure, building your software application, and for Salesforce or any SaaS vendor, adding that next customer was basically nothing. Now with AI, those unit economics have completely changed in that the cost for adding additional users is actually now pretty significant and is forcing every tech company to relook at how they're pricing, what their unit economics are, their entire business model, to turn it on its head, and everything is different.
Do you think founders are underestimating this problem, or are they just stuck with no good options?
Yeah, well, I think it depends where you're at, right? So, the typical SaaS company would have somewhere between 70 at the low end to 90% gross margins, right? That's something that is very common. So best in class 90, kind of 70 would be, at the low end. And despite that, most startups are not profitable, until they get into the hundreds of millions of revenue or even potentially billions of revenue,
Well, I mean,
right?
trying to get traction, so they're going out, and I've done it myself. So you get down through, and you want to acquire as many customers as possible. But the problem is the cloud infrastructure costs go up, and then the situation is finally it doesn't make any sense, right? Because you're not making any money, you just have a lot of customers.
Exactly. And, especially there's a lot of, software businesses that are utilize, in quotes, freemium model, or sometimes referred to as product-led growth. And the concept is I'll give something away for free and allow people to try it and use it on some limited basis. And then some of those people will convert to the paid plan. But the 95% that didn't pay is still, again, that incremental cost of serving them is so small that it makes the 5% that pay for everything else makes the math all work. Well, in AI, well, that's just not true anymore, right? Because the cost of serving customers, it can be now very significant. So the best in class AI native companies is looking like more like 60% gross margins, right? But can go down to really bad, beneath that. And so now fundamentally, you've got to rethink, okay, if I wasn't profitable at 80 to 90% gross margins, how the heck am I going to be profitable at 60% gross margins. It's just a completely different strategy that companies are needing to look at. Now, thankfully, most SaaS companies are not AI native companies, in that if you were founded after November 2022, you're going to look a lot different than if you were founded before then. The companies before then are probably SaaS companies that are adding some AI features, let's say, but maybe not embracing AI technology in a meaningful way enough to kind of skew and really jeopardize their economics. But those started after, understand that the cost of tokens is actually really significant, and you need to really think about differently about how you structure your cost model.
So, what are the biggest cloud cost killers you see repeatedly across startups you advise?
So yeah, so I'll just maybe back up and tell you a little bit about how we got into this, and what we're doing. So I've been involved in three other SaaS startups before. I've invested in over 50 companies. Been in the startup world my entire career, so for the last 30 years. And you know, cloud costs start small, but then all of a sudden become probably one of your biggest costs. The average SaaS company is spending 10% of whatever dollars they bring in on the top line goes to pay Amazon, Google, Azure, whatever, for hosting your applications. And it's really, you know, that's the average. But as a small startup, because your revenues are small, you haven't hit economies of scale, those numbers can be as high as 25%. At scale, best in class might be like 5%, right? So it's very significant. But now with AI, what we saw was that was yet another cost on top of these costs, and one that was growing super fast. And for all the reasons we talked about up front, was going to change maybe a painful problem into an unsustainable problem. And so we kind of went back to first principles, and we said, okay, why are these costs so hard to address? And fundamentally, we saw that there was, engineers, coders, they don't really know what things are going to cost when they're coding, and that's not really the top of mind. It's not necessarily they don't care. It's actually sometimes not easy to even know what something is going to cost until it gets into production, get some traffic, get some usage. And but by that time, these costs become evident, but the engineers are never given time to go back and say, okay, how do I make that thing more efficient? Or were my assumptions good that I made? Do I need to change those and maybe do things a different way? Because there's some fire drill for adding new features, salespeople need something to close a deal. Like those things always win, right? And so developers don't know what it costs when they're writing it, and they don't get any time back later to focus on it. And so what we thought about was, I wonder if we can't get engineers to spend time on costs, but costs are now existential in the AI world. What if we built a an AI or an engineer that would do this for them? And that's kind of the vision of Frugal. So we're basically building a cost engineer that works 24/7, looking through your code, your costs, all of your observability metrics, and coming up with strategies to both reduce the cost of your currently running applications, but also to protect you now in introducing changes to your code that could have material cost implications to your business.
So, how early should founders be thinking about cost optimization? Pre-seed, Series A, or once revenue hits?
So it's a good question. I would say, in the SaaS era before AI, people could ignore costs until they sort of hit scale and then start to spend some time on, okay, how do I make this more efficient? With AI now, I think that's different because you really need to contemplate and understand your unit economics in a much more visceral way right from the get-go, because it will drive your pricing model. Whereas in the past, that didn't really matter as much, right? So a typical Series Seed company is going to ignore this issue until they hit scale, and then, oh, okay, I'm trying to get to profitability. I got to focus on this thing now.
They may not have product market fit, right? And they're trying to figure it out. I mean, it's not a straight shot. It's like riding a snake sometimes.
It is exactly that. And when you ask, for example, like what are your unit economics to the average tech company, a lot of them probably couldn't even answer you, right? They don't know the answer to even how I measure that and quantify it for their free customers, their big customers, their average customers. Like understanding that unit economics has now all of a sudden become that much more important because these costs are actually existential to the survival of your business versus that prior era where the incremental customer cost was basically nothing.
Without getting too technical, how should founders think about building AI systems that are efficient by design rather than patched later? Because that happens with the startup a lot, right?
It does happen. It does happen a lot. So I think the key thing in AI really is understanding is being, it's all about token usage, right? And so it's the price per token, but you've got many different models and many different choices with price points across the board. Um, and so having the question is, can I get away with using a cheaper model, or do I need the most expensive model? And as I go forward in running my, evolving my engineering and evolving my product to be able to constantly ask that question, because these is not a static system. The world is changing every month, right? There's some new better mousetrap out there that you could contemplate. But the key is to have a test or an eval, they call them, to be able to understand whether swapping in another system into that is actually going to still produce a good enough outcome or output for a lesser cost. And that sounds simple, but it's actually really complicated because, for example, let's say I'm transcribing this podcast, right? I'm using AI to transcribe it. And let's say I use a cheap model or I use an expensive model. Well, the output is one better than the other. Well, it's kind of subjective, right? It's hard to, there's no numeric answer to sort of say if one transcript is better than other. You could probably read it and you could say, oh, I like this one. So, but coming up with these objective tests such that you can begin to evaluate, different options is an important thing. I would say the other thing, and this is where what we're trying to do at Frugal, is just to give developers visibility. So most devs, they don't have access to your Amazon bill. They don't even know like what, like they don't have credentials to look at it, let alone understand what things cost. And so building in visibility into the development process such that every developer would know the cost of running the current component or piece of the system that they're running. That's an important thing, the baseline. And then when I make a change to the code, to understand the cost implications of that. So the price to run this thing you're working on today is X, and you're making this code change, it's going to change it to Y. And then have some tooling in there that's coaching them on, have some guardrails, if you will, such that it gives them advice to say, well, if you make these changes, it could be Z, which is less. But just having visibility and having a developer understand what things cost of what they're working on is a great first step.
As an investor and a board member, how are expectations changing when you evaluate AI startups today?
Yeah, great question. I think the sustainability of the business model is definitely a way more important issue, and potentially an earlier issue as we discussed. That one where you'd say, they'll figure that out later, when they get to scale, just acquire a lot of users and good things will happen.
Those were the
Whereas,
old
what's that?
those were the old days.
Those are the old days. The old days are done. And now you kind of need to think about, am I just building a forever unprofitable business that is, I think people talk about uncharitably a lot of AI businesses, these sort of AI wrapper businesses, and everybody is going to embed a model in their software. I think it'll be 100% of software applications will use AI in some number of years. It's a question of when, not if, right? And then the question is, how material is that to their application such that it changes the economics of the entire thing? And so if you're a SaaS business, right, that has a new feature that's using AI and it doesn't really move the needle that much, well, okay, maybe that's not now material to you, or you're just making your product better. Um, Versus AI native companies that are, they're utilizing millions and millions of token per customer, and really need to think about the economics and whether that makes sense. I think there's also a lot of sugar highs that we're seeing where some business takes off, but then all of a sudden, those users weren't real, and that comes back down to earth, or maybe they're real, but the costs are just unsustainable. And then all of a sudden, the business needs to change the model. And we've seen this with all of the coding tools. They used to be unlimited, and then all of a sudden, whoops, we're losing massive amounts of money on every customer. We got to put in some caps. And then when people get these caps, they're like, what the
Well, they
heck?
didn't require the customers. It's very simple, right? They did it to customer acquisition, and they were driven by the VCs pushing them when you had your monthly board meetings to go down through and get more acquire customers, and you go down through. Well, this is a way to do it, and this will help me do it quickly. So VCs were partly to blame, and the investors, because they pushed them to do it. I've been there in
Yeah.
those meetings.
Yeah, you and I have been around long enough to remember, the dot-com era where there was a lot of, sending dog food in the mail that cost more to mail it than you got in revenue, right?
I remember irrational exuberance.
Yeah, exactly. And so that stuff gets sorted out. And I think we're probably going to go through that same that same process where there are some AI businesses that will not be ever profitable under the unit or the pricing and business model that they're utilizing. And then there'll be others where that they can figure out a path or modify their pricing. So a lot of AI native companies are moving to usage based pricing or outcome based pricing, which is fantastic in that it aligns sometimes the value proposition of with the value gained by the customer with with the amount paid, which is perfect. But there are some others that's really hard to do, and I think everybody is still kind of figuring this out.
Some
And at
people
the same time, the AI models themselves are evolving at such a bananas fast pace that this whole world is just really in flux right now.
I mean, I remember we built multi-agent large language models 3 years ago, and multimodal multi-agent large language models. I remember that Claude was 1,000 times faster in mathematical capabilities than ChatGPT at the time, right? And they would keep giving each other. I mean, that's another thing. We don't talk about multi-agent models and what the benefit is to the companies. If we think about that, this is going to help us for things like drug discovery to be able to do things profoundly faster and get to market a lot quicker. It changes the whole game. We don't, the thing we're forgetting, I think, I'm working in quantum computers a bit, and quantum computer can be 100 million times faster than the fast supercomputer. These are real statistics. What means it takes 10,000 years, takes us 200 seconds right now, right? Well, imagine what happens. Everything changes. Is the point where now data. Here's another problem, Mike. Look at this. The amount of data on the planet Earth is about 176 zettabytes. If you took DVDs, the old things or CDs, and stacked them one on top of another, today go 128 times between the Earth and the Moon. It's grown at 69.6% per year. Mike's world has about 300,000 items in your personal cloud. The entire web in 1996 was 257,000 websites. Mike, you have more information in personal cloud than the entire web. Mike's world has followed the same trajectory as the web, but that'll mean doubling every year. In 5 years with Internet of Things, you're going to have 10 million items. Mike, you're a smart guy, right? You've been around just like me, but think about it. How many times the last 2 weeks, hey, Mike, I sent you a message. Did you get it? Where'd you send it? I sent it to your email. Which one? I think your corporate. No, maybe your Gmail. When did you send it? I sent it 2 days ago. Let me check. I can't find it. Send it again. This infobesity problem is killing us. So
Mm,
the dilemma is we keep getting more data, and we can't shrink down on the tools because we can't become competitive.
yeah,
The
yeah.
smartest people in the world are going to be the ones that are maestros of AI and control it like nobody else can. They're the ones that, as there's a bet in the Valley, who's going to have the first $1 billion single person company.
Yeah, I've
Really?
heard that one. Yeah,
Seriously. And it's
yeah,
unbelievable. And
yeah.
I'm living proof. having gone down through it in all kinds of different ways.
Yeah.
See it, and it's
Well,
changed. And on one
yeah,
side, we got to watch the costs, and the other thing is, what's the return going to be? If the value of what
absolutely.
I'm getting is drug discovery, and it's going to cost me 10 times as much, but I'm going to build a company that's worth 1,000 times more. It's pretty simple, right? We got to start looking at what the value is of what we're doing,
Yeah,
and right, go down through, and it's value based. It's tough to get people to think about that because they may not understand what the results are. That's another issue.
yeah, I think you're bang on, and really software development tools, which is the world we're living in, to me is at the absolute vanguard of AI adoption, right? This is the furthest thing along. The coding tools are ubiquitous now within developers. And I was talking to our one of our devs the other day. He said he's written more code in the last 6 months at Frugal than he did in 6 years at his last job. So the productivity is undoubtedly like amazing.
Yeah,
And
this
you
same
can
here.
see a world where software developers will no longer write code anymore. They basically, I'm watching these guys and they have 5 tabs. Claude is tab one. He's telling it, creating a plan of some feature he wants to build. Tab two, it's in the middle of running and he's redirecting it to something else, and so on and so on. He's got this symphony of basically a team running any of these different Claudes and different tabs. And it's undoubtedly, massively productive. And every industry is going to be like that, at some point going forward. Software development is really at the furthest level of this evolution that we're all going to go through.
It's interesting because if you go down through well, I told I talked about some things offline about the cancer vaccine and my own journey with stem cells, but we're going to be able to help humanity to do things to be able to live longer, live better quality lives, and we're going to need tools just like yours to be able to make sure it's cost effective. But the other thing is we got to make sure that those tools are getting the job done.
Absolutely. Yeah,
And you're right,
absolutely.
it's changing every day. Somebody has this feature, somebody has that feature, somebody has this feature, that feature, and the it's changed. I was with an insurance company recently that's got over 30,000 employees, and it was so interesting because when I was talking to the senior executive of that company, very nice people, they had no clue what they were doing with AI, none.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I actually went down through and took my multi-agent large language models with me, and I know a little bit about, the environment, building a business. And I went through their entire models, and I told them what they needed. Well, I don't know. We got to take it step by step, and I don't know if we can do this. And the AI person that they had involved in the company was on a 1 to 10, probably a 3. And I was like, you can't tell people. They don't know what they don't know. Unfortunately, in these companies, for all you companies out there, listen, there's a reason the dinosaurs aren't around anymore. I want to be a dinosaur.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it is definitely a different world, but for us, I think that this is following a similar pattern in software development that we saw with other things. So one of my primary previous businesses was in security. And so the way security used to work was that you would build software and there'd be some security auditor at the end of that process that would find some bugs or issues, and they'd send it back to dev and say, hey, you got to fix this stuff, right? And you go through that cycle a couple times until it's clean. And then we got smarter, and there were tools that basically, as you write code, would tell you, oh, like you have an issue, or when you try and check it in. And so this is often called shifting left in development, but pushing a thing upstream that used to get done late in the process, making it done earlier. And that's exactly what we're trying to do here, which is with cost. And I don't think there's an option anymore in the post AI world, in that you can't, as we said, ignore this thing till late in the process, or late in your even evolution as a company, let alone in your software development lifecycle. But we need to embed the economics basically into the conversation as you're writing code, versus waiting later for things to kind of blow up.
It's like building a house, right? When you build a house, you got to go shoot. It's a whole lot harder to go back through and move your foundation around after it's already built, and nothing good happens.
Yeah,
So,
that's an extreme example, but yeah, for sure. But even in software, to find a bug in a live application is typically, anywhere from 10 to 100x more expensive to fix it than if you caught it when you were writing it.
and this goes for everything, Mike. It's not just that. It's when you're building a company, a startup, those kind of things. Whatever you're building, you got to make sure you're not making mistakes, and that's where AI can help us. So my AI, by the way, I have 14 large language models working as a team, and she's like my grandmother with empathy and compassion. And she's been listening to our conversations. She's asked me to ask you some questions. So she said,
Okay.
one metric every AI founder should track weekly that most don't.
One metric AI every,
AI.
basically yeah, what are your unit economics? I would say of your customers. I'd say probably most are not tracking that number.
Biggest myth founders believe about cloud providers.
Biggest myth that they believe about cloud providers. Um, you know, maybe that it's always cheap to get started, and what you don't realize is how fast it grows. Um, and that maybe one other myth is the only way to save money with your cloud bill is to commit to Amazon for a longer period of time, which is what they do. So they say, don't bother trying to address the root cause of your cost
Yeah,
issues. But if you
double-
commit to my savings plan, which is that you lock in for 2 years, I'll give you 10 points. That is what 90% of people are doing to optimize cost today.
because they don't know. They don't know what they don't know. That's the problem, right? And they're hoping it'll work out over time.
Exactly.
So, if you were out there and for all those startups are listening, as an AI company today, what's the first architecture decision you'd obsess over?
I'm probably the wrong person to ask that question to. I'm not. It's been a while since I've been actually been coding itself. Um, but when we look at how what I've observed just working with our devs over the last little while and building Frugal, is that I hear a lot of people, like, when we say all of our code is being generated by AI, and they're saying, listen, I've tried this stuff and these coding tools generate a lot of crap and they make a lot of mistakes. And the answer is yes, that is true. But you need to fundamentally think about how you re-architect what you're building to take advantage of agents and tools. Um, you can't just keep writing code the way you were writing code. There is an investment of slightly different architectures and different documentation and different processes that your engineers need to invest in to be able to go to 100% AI generated coding, and that fundamental building blocks and scaffolding, if you will, is necessary in order to take advantage of this new paradigm. But don't assume that when you get your first crappy output from AI that that's all that it can do. Um,
It's interesting. So she went down through and answered the question. So it's very interesting. You want to hear what she said?
yeah, yeah, yeah. Go
Uh,
ahead.
she said, I'd obsess over whether inference cost scales with customer value or with usage. If every click triggers a GPU bill, you don't have a product, you have a cost center. So I designed to decouple intelligence from real time compute, cache hard pre compute, and use the smallest model possible. If revenue doesn't scale faster than inference costs, nothing else matters. Interesting. Yeah.
That's why the AIs are going to replace us, Gary. It's a better answer than the one
I,
I gave you. But but
I
one
when I designed this thing 3 years ago and understood multi-agent models and how it was going to be a team, people said it was crazy, right? It's absolutely going to happen, and it goes across multiple AI tools, right? They're going down through and they can think, and when you put that empathy and compassion layer on top of it,
yeah.
where it's about you, what I did is I took a Skinnerian psychology, operant conditioning, and tokenized goodness, and then on a Rogerian way, humanistic psychology, I put in unconditional love and positive regard, like my grandmother,
Nice.
and it
That's
worked.
awesome.
Yeah, it's something you want to be around. I mean, my grandmother loved me no matter what. I was dirty, fell down, she'd clean me up, and that's the kind of love we want, right? Anyhow,
Yeah, absolutely.
I really appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedule, Mike, to join us today. It's
Great
really,
chatting with you.
people don't think about these kind of things, how to be able to really manage their company so they're going to be successful. And you've given us a lot of insight in that today, so I appreciate that. If you want to stay on for a few minutes after the show, we can talk. Would be good to see.
Absolutely.
And
Thanks,
to all
Gary.
of you out there, thank you. Appreciate it. And for all of you out there, thank you for joining one more time. GSD presents Top Global Startups. It's because of you we are here. We have 180 companies inside of my family office representing 73 countries around the world. We believe that we can all make a difference. So let's be happy, let's be safe, and let's be healthy. And I'll talk to you again soon with another exciting edition of GSD Presents. Thank you, everybody. And thank you, Mike, for taking time out of your busy schedule to join us.
Great chatting with you.